Hi, everybody, and this is Therapy and Catholicism Part 2. So, what we're going to talk about today is the nitty gritty of how to do therapy as a Catholic therapist. But the thing to remember here is this video is for educational purposes only. Don't start doing random therapy on people if you're not trained to do therapy. That would be weird. And, apply everything in a proper way. Don't do anything silly. It's like this is for educational purposes. This is not a therapy training. This is not a therapy relationship. This is not me doing therapy on you. This is education and Catholic thinking and that type of thing. Don't do silly things with it. There we go. All right, so now what we're going to do today is we are going to talk about how to do therapy. So, the basic thing is that we want to be healing people. What is the goal of therapy? The goal of therapy is healing. The goal of therapy is the same thing as the goal, essentially, of religion. The goal is to become another incarnation of the Word, to become transformed so that our humanity is more like the humanity of Christ and that we bear his divinity within us, so that we become fully human through the intervention of the divine. The problem in human life is that often we become like an animal, acting out of our lower passions, or try to become like an angel, using our higher faculties to curb the passions without the influence of God, and then becoming prideful. So we either try to control ourselves or indulge ourselves, rather than to become sons. We either are rebels or slaves, rather than sons and daughters of the Most High. We don't live the way we are meant to live. And so the purpose of therapy is to transform us. For example, therapy techniques that are used today will transform people into various things, but not into what we're supposed to be. So, for example, if we take some wise characters from some popular literature, we can understand what goes wrong in therapy. See, when we do therapy on someone from the mindfulness therapies, for example, we end up with something like a Yoda. Yoda is a character from Star Wars who's a little green alien who is wise, but the type of wisdom he has is not human. He may be peaceful, he may be strange, but he's not human. The other type of wisdom we might use comes from like the Stoic type things or um, the CBT type approaches. And then we end up with something like the Star Trek character Spock, which is rational. Spock is a very rational character. He thinks, oh, this is not logical. But he's only half human and half Vulcan, half alien. So he's not fully human. We're not supposed to walk around talking like a computer. That's not real mental health, even though it may feel better than acting like an animal. So it's going to feel better to be like a little alien like Yoda than to act like an animal. It's going to feel better to be like a robot, kind of talking in this rational way like Spock, who's also half alien. It's going to also feel better if maybe we can have this more authentic wisdom. You could see this wise figure like Dumbledore from the Harry Potter series, and we're not making a giant debate about whether Harry Potter is good or bad, because that's not the purpose of this video. But Harry Potter, the character Dumbledore, is a very popular character. Um, and so it's really important to look at him like this wise wizard. But the thing is that, and that's maybe corresponds to the 12-step approaches. Like, yes, he has wisdom, he has, courage and these good virtues, and he does all these good things, so on and so forth. Um, but then the thing, like, Dumbledore is just not, I'm sorry, he's not the same thing as Gandalf from the series The Lord of the Rings. Gandalf really is this very robust character who's, has deep joy in life. This way he like yells at his friends. This way that he, um, you know, sacrifices himself. He has this full spectrum of human emotions, of joy, of sorrow, of all these different things, and even the glory of these ways in which there are these miraculous things that happen to him in the story. So I'm not going to spoil anything, um, but there's those type of things. So there's these ways in which the true emotional health is something like Gandalf, not like Dumbledore. So it's that Gandalf represents this true emotional health. like being another incarnation of the Word, having the mind of God, the type of mind of God that is in the Psalms and in the Rosary, the heart of God that is in the Divine Mercy Chaplet. These things are so important, that this life of God, this psychological life of God, is so important, that this is what it means to be truly human. And we can only become truly human through the influence of God. Otherwise, sorry, folks, something went down the wrong pipe. So we might say that the real thing is to really understand that what we're aiming for in therapy is to make Gandalfs. What we're aiming for is to make other incarnations of the Word. What we're aiming for is for incarnate wisdom, true humanity in light of divinity. We're not aiming for somebody who's going to act kind of like, like the Yoda thing that's not fully human, the Spock thing that's not fully human, the Dumbledore thing that's just not there yet. It's the Gandalf type thing is what we're looking for. And that's what we're trying to create. When we're a therapist, that's what we're trying to make you into a Gandalf, into another incarnation of the Word. We're doing that by the evangelization or elevation of cultural forms of therapy. So we're going to elevate the cultural forms of therapy in order to make you into another. We're going to do the thing like the incarnation, enculturate the gospel, elevate the therapy approach to help you become elevated, to help you elevate those parts of yourself so you can become another incarnation of the Word. That's the purpose of the therapeutic discipline. So, to just kind of lay some things out, the therapist now, that's what we're trying to do. And so the way that we do that is essentially by shifting from, we don't want people to be living in an autopilot type of mindset. We want people to be active in their growth. It doesn't mean they have to be like thinking all the time or praying all the time in terms of like always generating thoughts, but they need to be, even if they relax consciously or they think consciously or they pray consciously, they need to be on. They can't just be like going through life in what Father Irala calls the passive state. We want to be in the active state. We want to be active and living and real and training ourselves and growing. That's important. And we also want to be, we want to have our reason, our rational, the conscious part of ourselves should be in charge of the unconscious part of ourselves through the cooperation with the superconscious, meaning the divine, with God. So the thing is, we need to have that as our goal. We don't want to have anger ruling us, and then we flip out, meaning our unconscious goes on top of the conscious, so to speak, and we beat people up. We don't want that. So that's the goal. And the thing is that we can only safely dominate we can only really do this procedure of ordering the conscious on top of the unconscious with the help of the superconscious, which is God. Because if we try to dominate the unconscious with the conscious, we then end up trying to make you into an angel. And if we try to dominate if the unconscious dominates the conscious, then you're an animal. And the thing is, you only become a human when you bring in this third force, this third thing, which can allow these things to coexist, which can allow the moderation and integration of these things. And St. Padre Pio talks about this actually when he says that through mental prayer, we tend to order our conscience and moderate our passions. And so it's like through prayer, we kind of balance everything out here. We kind of bring everything into harmony. We eventually, so this is very important to understand that this is what we're trying to do in therapy. Is we're trying to create new sons, new daughters, healthy people who have a healthy attachment to God as Father, which redeems our humanity and reorganizes our psychology. And so that's very important to understand that that's what we're trying to do. So the question is then, how do we do this? And again, the most important thing that the Catholic anthropology can get us is an understanding of faculties. And so in the last video, we talked a little bit about this. I use a practical list of faculties that is convenient. It's not exactly what St. Thomas would say. It's not exactly what the Christian East would say, but it's kind of like a mishmash of both of them. So in some ways, there's some resonance with both. And we don't have to talk about things exactly how St. Thomas did or exactly what the Christian East did, as long as we're talking about real things in some way. And that's kind of, so if you want to say, all right, we have the ability to pay attention to things, the ability to imagine things, the ability to think about things, the ability to decide things, take actions, and the ability to use our hearts and relate to things, and whether our spiritual heart is illumined by grace. So that's our attention, our imagination, our intellect, our will, our heart, and our spirit. And so that's kind of a basic understanding of human anthropology. And this understanding allows us to understand the disciplines in the mental health field as therapists and allows us to kind of use this as our instruments tray, so to speak, as we operate on the minds of people who come to us. So, what this allows us to do is it allows us to take the established theories and so this is step one toward making them palatable, to making them actually help us make people into Gandalfs. We have to first of all ensure that we don't isolate, because if we say, okay, I only use attention type therapies in the mindfulness-based therapies, MBSR, MBCT, these type of things, we can't use these. It's not allowed, in my opinion, because the reason why is because we have a false understanding of the human person. So I don't believe that a Catholic client should practice mindfulness as mindfulness or isolated from other processes and practices. I don't believe that a Catholic therapist should promote the word mindfulness. I mean, we can use it. It's a delicate business, but we should be very clear about what we mean when we promote mindfulness. We should be very clear that we are not promoting the Buddhist understanding of mindfulness. That's very, very important. I mean, it's also there's some risk. I believe there's risk of danger of confusion. If not, I don't know if scandal, possibly scandal, meaning people getting they're getting a wrong idea when we engage in mindfulness as a Catholic publicly as a therapist. I think there could be problems with that. But I also think that the problem can be um, confusion, because the thing is these it's delicate to use these meditations. So I really think that people should stay away from anything that resembles Buddhist meditation in terms of sitting and doing these type of things. We should stay away from it. Although the content is not, I think, intrinsically unusable or unredeemable, it's unprofitable because of a few certain things, which is like that the average person will be confused by this practice, not understand the difference between experiencing their awareness and experiencing God. And there can be some errors here. And so it can be much more profitable to use something simpler like mindfulness in everyday life, meaning, okay, pay attention to some sensations here. When you're eating, eat. It's like it's making it a little more simple, using what Father Irala talks about in his book, The Method of Conscious Sensations. And that's a better term for Catholic therapists to use. The method of conscious sensations is a better term, comes out of the work of Dr. Vitaz and Father Irala, and it's a little different from Buddhist things, so we want to use that term preferably. Of course, we can talk practically using the word mindfulness to other clinicians. We could even mention it in some ways to clients, but it's something that we should be careful with. But the method of conscious sensations, and also another thing that can be used, but the thing is, again, this is the problem with these approaches. Brother David Steindl-Rast wrote a book called Gratefulness, which uses mindfulness in a more prayerful manner. The book can be useful, but again, we can see, I believe, the damaging effects of not fully linking it into the Catholic mystical tradition and making it kind of fall into Buddhism. There are some errors. I believe it can lead us to some places we don't want to go, but the idea of using mindfulness relationally is also good. So that aspect of what Brother David Steindl-Rast, we pray for him, because I think that some of the things that he says are dangerous and can be damaging psychologically and spiritually. Just because, not because I'm trying to judge him, but that's merely a statement of my personal discernment of what the book contains. It was a book that I really liked back when I was, practicing more of the Buddhist methods and things like that. But it has elements which are useful to the Catholic therapist. Meaning, so if I pay attention to the sunset, I can do it as an act of gratefulness to God. If I If I feel the warmth of, the water and as I'm washing my hands, I could do it as a grateful act, a relational act, or even methods like, this is another thing that I kind of thought of later on. We can, feel a feeling in memory of the fact that Christ could feel the sensations, and it's honoring the incarnation in these ways. So we can you can use our senses in a devotional manner and in a way that is different and distinct from Buddhism. We can do these things in a different kind of a way. We can breathe as a prayer, remembering the last breaths of Christ on the cross. And we can even do it praying for others. Except I breathe, I offer up the last breath of Christ for that person in front of me. We can pray as we breathe and pray as we use our senses, and we can use them in a relational manner. And it's very important to remember that we use these things at this level in union with other methods so that the person using them does not fall prey to the error that they are merely an awareness. If we were to suggest in an exercise routine to only exercise the calves of the legs, that would be irrational. But only training mindfulness makes a person unbalanced because it makes the person think that as they train awareness, that they are awareness. And they forget that they have faculties. Because, of course, just like the muscles of the eye cannot see the muscles of the eye that adjust it, sight of awareness will never find the faculties when it looks for them. And so the person can fall into the great delusions of the Eastern faiths. The great delusions are that we are a true self. The great delusion is that we are not, because if the eyes are to look in, if we become cross-eyed, you will see a big eye. And you will think you found your true self. I am the big eye. The eyes look, but that eye is an illusion, a composite of the two eyes looking. If I squint my eyes and everything looks blurry, I could say, oh, everything is one. But these are optical illusions of consciousness. These are not true experiences, although they seem more compelling and more true than anything. The reason why I'm giving this odd language is because this is the experience of myself and others who have done these things. And so you can end up in places, in spiritual delusions, in places in dead ends, and also you can experience great traumas, such as those documented by the researcher Dr. Willoughby Britton. Those things that I have experienced personally, because some people can experience either through meditation or meditation and substances, they can experience a deep destruction of their identity. Because they can, by using only awareness or having something that expands their awareness, such as a psychedelic substance, they can experience themselves psychologically as awareness. And then their traumas can then come up because their identity is gone and there's no cap on the unconscious, so to speak. All the stuff comes up. Or they just kind of freak out and don't know who they are. Or they experience the great tragedy of liberation. And so it's like when they get liberated from everything, but they become inside out. It's as if they are never again hungry, but their stomach is inside out. They are the most poor of the poor. To be enlightened is to be the poorest of the poor, to think you have everything and to have nothing but yourself. And so these are the great psychological errors and dangers of training mindfulness separate from other disciplines, separate from other practices. And this can be greatly psychologically damaging. I was personally damaged by these practices for the duration of almost a year, and probably without the help and grace of God and the practice of prayer, I would not be a normal functioning human today. And there are many people who are deeply mentally damaged by the use of meditation and psychedelic substances because they blow out the sense of the conscious self. Because, again, what that does is it makes us into either we become angels or we become animals. All of our unconscious junk comes up like an animal, and we become in fear, because our mind is disrupted, or we think we are something pure and free, and we forget all of that. And there's all these damages that this can do. And it's deeply like the forbidden fruit. It's deeply like this forbidden fruit, to know something, because we look and we become beguiled, as the prophecy says, of which refers also to the devil. We too become beguiled by our own beauty. We look at the beauty of what we are, but it's an illusion. We see this illusion, which is a mere reflection of ourself. And so we fall in love with that rather than in love with God, because since we are in the image of God, we find the only other thing which could potentially satisfy. And finding the counterfeit, we turn toward that and lose out on all that matters, and do everything that matters in a way that is meaningless and destructive. And so the dangers of these disciplines are not to be overstated, but the promise of things like the method of conscious sensations warrants their use in therapy. The thing is that we have to be conversant with both the benefits and the drawbacks of these approaches, and know in and out the territories and the ups and downs of these things. So a Catholic therapist can use things that resemble mindfulness, ought to do so in either a simple, straightforward way of just paying attention to more things, or in a devotional way, and should do these disciplines in a way that links them into part of a full body workout, so to speak, of the attention, the awareness, and these things. It doesn't mean you have to be training the attention and awareness at every time you're training a faculty. You can pay attention to some trees as you're walking and not try to imagine anything. That's fine. But the thing is that it's really a matter of having a robust training and understanding that we are not only training one part of the human mind. So that is something that we want to understand for training the faculties of awareness and the faculties of our senses, and to realize again that this is that first tier of awareness as part of our instrument tray as a therapy practitioner, into which we can place and redeem and elevate the disciplines of mindfulness-based stress reduction, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, all these different things, and elevate the mindfulness elements of Buddhist tradition into the Catholic framework of the authentic human person, making them do finally what they tried to do in the first place. Because Buddhist meditation cannot actually lead to self-awareness, and eventually leads to blindness. This is the problem when you are aware of yourself as a Buddhist without any framework of yourself being a sinner or in relationship to Christ or praying. Your awareness actually cannot be self-aware, because what happens is the focus causes eventually a blindness, as if you are looking into this mirror of your own light and going blind. Because what happens, and practitioners will understand this, when you are aware of yourself, eventually there's a stage where you are aware, and then you experience yourself to be the awareness, and then you absorb into the experience of being the awareness, and you forget and liberate yourself from all the lower things. But that is not self-awareness. And so Buddhism cannot achieve in its own practices the mental health, the liberation, the true liberation from suffering that it ever aimed for. So Buddhism cannot really be what Buddhism was meant to be until it converts itself to Catholicism, until it integrates itself into a real human anthropology. So the thing is, we were not anti-Buddhism. We are trying to elevate all that is human into what it can be in Christ, and that is the only way to make it what it can be. To go to all the manifestations of humanity, to go to all the manifestations of man, to lift these things up and elevate them. So, that is what is meant by how a Catholic therapist can use mindfulness therapies. And the same thing, a Catholic client can understand these things based on reading. You can just simply understand. If you're a Catholic client, you can use awareness skills, but you must understand that awareness of self is not the same thing. To listen to yourself is not the same thing as to be heard by God. And the enjoyment of paying attention to yourself is not the same thing as being heard by God. That the natural sensations of paying attention to the sunset or paying attention to your breath are not the peace of God, but are a natural peace and a natural consolation and a natural euphoria. This comes from the letter to the bishops on some aspects of Christian meditation, and we have to understand these things. And so, a person can enter into the use of these disciplines in a way that is healthy. You can practice the method of conscious sensations as described by Father Irala in his book Achieving Peace of Heart, or in Spanish, I think it was Control Cerebral. I think it was Spanish. I don't think it was Portuguese. Um, I think it was Spanish. Yeah, he was from Nicaragua, um, and he wrote these books. I think that's a very good place to look. And also, you can practice these things devotionally. As I said, I think it's perfectly fine to breathe in with the intention of offering up Christ's last breath for somebody. You can pray in that way. You could feel just feel the sensation of your own hand in memory of the incarnation of Christ. You can do all kinds of things that are somewhat devotional. You could be creative in this in nature, but I think that that's what somebody who's a practitioner can do. You can kind of intersperse, like, so for example, if you're praying actively and you're, okay, I'm saying some prayers, I can pause for a second and feel my hands in memory of Christ, and then I can keep praying, and I can kind of rest my mind in that way. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just another way of kind of praying and keeping keeping these disciplines as part of a full body thing connected to the wider Catholic faith. And so, in the next few videos, we're going to do, because this went a little bit longer describing how to do things with the mindfulness approaches. So I'm going to make another few that are going to talk about the other types of therapy. So what we're going to look at in those, we'll look at like the other approaches, like you know, there's things like, how are we going to do CBT? How are we going to do the 12-step movement? These type of things. How can we do these things in line with Catholic teaching and in line with things like that? So we're going to talk about those things in other videos, because there's probably way too much that we can cram into here. But the thing that can be said is, you can see what's happening is we don't want to dose somebody with the original thing. In any type of therapy approach, you don't take the original thing and give it to someone. You don't take what the therapist is, or as a client. I think this is just education. Don't do anything stupid with your therapy. Talk about how to do this with your priest or your therapist, and if you want to modify something, don't just watch this video and then just run off and do something that's not healthy for you. Um, so what you want to do is you want to take it in line. So, for example, if your therapist is saying, okay, I want you to do mindfulness, well, you can't really do mindfulness, but you can do something very similar. You can do the method of conscious sensations, and you can do this devotionally also. You can kind of, so you have to use it in line with your faith. You have to redeem what's being given to you. Doesn't mean you have to get rid of that therapist. It just means you have to be like, hey, no, my faith says I have to do it this way. I have to modify what you're saying. I have to do it in a way that's comfortable for me, a way that's going to work for me. That's okay. You got to do that. You can do that. That's okay. Um, and you got to understand, some things about it. So it's understanding. Okay, it's part of a bigger set of trainings. You don't only use these approaches. It's not the be all end all. It's not all about mindfulness. Not all about awareness. It's part of a bigger thing. There's many other things that should be integrated into treatment. There's many other things that should be trained, and there are ways that you can redeem it and elevate it. And you don't do it the original way. You redeem and elevate, and you do it as part of a bigger thing that's a correct anthropology, um, and that actually makes the thing more effective. And so that's very important. So you don't want to do the original thing, you want to do the more effective version of it in light of Catholicism. So that's probably the same time, that's probably a way of talking about how we redeem approaches, and a way that redeeming one level looks like. And so the next videos are going to be like looking at the rest of the instrument tray, looking at the rest of the menu for clients, like looking at that menu of like, okay, the mindfulness-based therapies, the cognitive therapies, the behavioral therapies, the 12-step therapies, and looking at how we can redeem these things in light of that Catholic tradition and all that. So I hope you've enjoyed looking at this. We're going to put this up a little bit, and I hope that this is helpful in understanding the field of therapy and how it relates to the Catholic tradition.